There's a particular smell that defines an Australian childhood in the 1970s. It's the scent of frying onions, powdered gravy, and the steam rising from a pot of overboiled cabbage. Back then, the lucky country was moving through a decade of massive change, but in the family kitchen, things remained remarkably simple. These meals weren't just budget-friendly, they were the fuel for a lifestyle that was naturally leaner and more active than the one we know today. Long before the arrival of American fast food giants on every corner and the rise of highly processed convenience meals, Australian mums were experts at stretching $1 and a pound of mince to feed a hungry brood. Today, we're taking a trip back to the Laminex tables of the 70s to look at 15 cheap meals that kept a generation of Aussies slim, healthy, and ready for a game of backyard cricket. We start with a true blue classic, curried sausages. In the 70s, snags were the cheapest protein you could find at the local butcher. To make them go further, they were boiled, skinned, sliced, and tossed into a thick, yellowish sauce made from Keen's curry powder, onions, and sultanas. Served on a bed of white rice, this dish was a staple in every suburban household. Unlike today's takeaway, curries loaded with coconut cream and sugar, the 70s version was mostly water, spices, and vegetables like peas and carrots. It was filling, dirt cheap, and provided a lean source of energy without the hidden calories of modern processed sauces. Moving on from the spicy snags, we find the ultimate Monday night rescue, shepherd's pie. In Australia, this was rarely made with lamb. It was almost always cottage pie, made with budget beef mince. The secret to its health benefits was the bulking out process. Mums would grate every vegetable in the crisper, carrots, celery, and onions, into the meat to make it stretch for a family of 5. Topped with a thin layer of mashed potato and finished under the griller, it was a balanced meal that relied on whole ingredients rather than additives. It was hearty enough to satisfy a growing lad, but lacked the massive portions and oily sides we see in modern pub grub. After the meaty comfort of the pie, we dive into a Friday night tradition, tuna mornay. Before the days of fresh Atlantic salmon, tinned tuna was the king of the pantry. This dish was a simple mix of canned fish, a basic white sauce, and a handful of crushed cornflakes or breadcrumbs on top for crunch. Families often added a tin of corn kernels or some frozen peas to give it some body, because it was baked rather than fried and relied on a small amount of fish to feed many. It was a low-fat, high-protein meal that kept the spare tire at bay. It was the definition of making do with what was in the cupboard. Following the light simplicity of tuna, we encounter a dish that divided many a dinner table, lamb fry and bacon. In the 70s, offal was incredibly cheap and liver, or lamb fry, was touted as a nutritional powerhouse for kids. Sautéed with onions and served with a few rashers of bacon and a side of mashed spuds, it was packed with iron and vitamins. Because liver is so nutrient-dense and low in fat, it provided a level of satiety that modern fast food simply can't match. You didn't need a massive plate to feel full, and you certainly didn't go back for seconds. Moving from the traditional to the exotic, we find the 1970s dinner party king, apricot chicken. This was the height of sophistication in the suburbs. It usually involved chicken drumsticks, the cheapest cut, simmered in a mix of French onion soup mix and a tin of apricot nectar. While it sounds sweet, it was served with plenty of steamed greens and rice, which balanced the meal. Compared to today's honey soy or sweet and sour takeaways, the 70s apricot chicken was made with real poultry on the bone and lacked the heavy oils and deep frying that add so many hidden calories to modern convenience poultry. After the fruity chicken, we return to the butcher's budget bin for braised steak and onions. This used the chuck or gravy beef cuts that required hours of slow simmering to become edible. The long cooking process broke down the tough fibres, creating a rich, thin gravy without the need for heavy creams or fats, served with meat and 3 veg, usually boiled potatoes, pumpkin, and beans. It was a high-protein, high-fibre meal that fueled a day of manual labour or schoolyard play. It was simple, honest food that didn't lead to overeating. Moving on from the slow braise, we look at Australia's first brush with international cuisine, suburban chop suey. This wasn't exactly authentic, but it was a hit. It was essentially mincemeat, shredded cabbage, celery, and onions, seasoned with a splash of soy sauce and maybe some ginger if mum was feeling fancy. It was almost entirely vegetables, making it incredibly low in calories but high in volume. It was a one-pot wonder that filled the belly without emptying the wallet. Unlike modern Chinese Australian food, there was no batter, no deep frying, and very little added sugar. Following the cabbage-heavy stir-fry, we have the Sunday night staple, corned beef. A large piece of silverside was boiled for hours with peppercorns, vinegar, and a bit of brown sugar. The beef was served sliced thin with a simple white sauce flavoured with parsley or mustard. The leftovers were the real prize, used for school sandwiches the next day. Because the meat was boiled, much of the fat was rendered out, leaving a lean, salty protein that was far healthier than the processed deli meats we buy in plastic packets today. After the salty beef, we find the vegetarian hero of the 70s, zucchini slice. As backyard veggie patches became popular, everyone seemed to have an excess of zucchinis. This dish, a mix of grated zucchini, eggs, a bit of flour, and maybe some bacon bits, was the ultimate budget filler. It was often eaten cold in school lunch boxes or as a light dinner. It was packed with greens and protein from the eggs, providing a nutrient-dense alternative to the meat-heavy pies and pastries that dominate modern quick lunches. Moving from the slice to a national obsession, the Aussie spag bowl, in the 70s, this wasn't an Italian masterpiece. It was a budget stretcher. Mince was cooked with onions and a tin of tomato soup or paste, then served over a mountain of thick spaghetti. Aussies didn't use much oil, and the parmesan usually came out of a green cardboard canister. Because it was a home-cooked meal made with basic ingredients, it lacked the high sodium and sugar content found in today's jarred pasta sauces. It was a high-carb fuel for active kids who spent their afternoons riding bikes until the streetlights came on. Following the hearty pasta, we have the winter lifesaver, pea and ham soup. This was made using the leftover bone from the Sunday roast or a cheap ham hock. Split peas were boiled until they turned into a thick, green porridge. It was incredibly cheap, virtually fat-free, and loaded with fibre and protein. A single bowl with a slice of buttered toast was enough to keep you warm and full for hours. It was a slow food classic that required no processed ingredients and provided a level of nutrition that modern instant soups can't touch. Moving from the soup to the ultimate end-of-the-week meal, savoury mince on toast. When the grocery money was running low, Mum would fry up the last of the mince with some onions and whatever frozen veg were left in the bag. Served on thick slices of white toast, it was a simple, satisfying meal. Because it was portion controlled by the bread and bulked out with veggies, it was a balanced way to end the day. It was a far cry from the oversized burgers and fries that have become the modern quick-fix dinner. After the mince, we look at a side dish that often became the main event: cauliflower cheese. A whole cauliflower was boiled and then smothered in a basic cheese sauce and grilled. In the 70s, vegetables were the stars of the plate because meat was expensive. This dish provided a massive hit of vitamins and calcium. While the cheese sauce added some fat, the sheer volume of cauliflower meant you were getting full on fibre rather than empty calories. Moving on, we find the humble risole. These were the Aussie version of meatballs, but flatter and often bulked out with breadcrumbs, an egg, and finely chopped onions to make the meat go further. Fried in a pan and served with mashed potatoes and a side of peas, they were a portion-controlled protein hit. Unlike modern jumbo burgers, rissoles were modest in size and made from scratch, ensuring there were no hidden fillers or preservatives. Finally, we reach the fancy budget meal: stuffed capsicums. Large bell peppers were hollowed out and filled with a mixture of leftover rice, mince, and tomato sauce, then baked until soft. It was a clever way to use up leftovers and ensure everyone got a big serving of vegetables. The capsicum acted as a natural bowl, limiting the portion size and providing a sweet, nutritious casing for the filling. It was a light, healthy end to the week that reflected the waste not, want not attitude of the era. These 15 meals weren't just about saving cents, they were about a different way of living. In the 1970s, the Australian kitchen was a place of simplicity, where whole ingredients were the norm and portion control was just a natural result of feeding a large family on a budget. We didn't have the endless snacks or the supersized culture that defines the modern diet. We ate what was put in front of us, we cleared our plates, and we spent our energy in the great outdoors. Looking back, those cheap, humble meals did more than just save money. They kept a nation lean, healthy, and right as rain. The world has moved on, but perhaps there's still a lesson to be learned from the curried sausages and the savoury mince of yesteryear. Sometimes the simplest way is the healthiest way.